Zionists like to call them or to call you. This minority would be under military regime. So we have from 1948 to 1966 a military regime in the north of Israel, on the Galilee, and in the Negev, in the south, on the Arabs, Bedouins, in this case Palestinian of the south. And all discussion, can we integrate our Zionist internal discussion, can we integrate, in fact, within the Jewish state, a minority of 150? We're talking about a population of the time of 600,000 Jews with 150,000 Arabs, which is not very far off what we have today, but just in millions. So the debate of the 50s is illuminating for us to understand the debate of today. The debate in the 50s was, can we create one state? Okay, there was no West Bank and Gaza, but can we create one state having a minority, such a big minority within of Israel? And the conclusion, Ben-Gurion, by the way, the Prime Minister of Israel, wanted to continue the ethnic cleansing. He wanted to continue to expel the Palestinians left. Moshe Sharet, Minister of Foreign Affairs, will tell him, we cannot initiate a plan of expulsion without having a general frame of a war or other kind of pretext, which makes us to understand that, in fact, ethnic cleansing, genocide, and other big colonial crimes can be done not as initiated out of blanco, but in a certain context. Israel will integrate the Palestinians. The question will be down concerning the partition. De facto is a partition of Palestine. There is 2 areas of Palestine which are outside of Israel. All the rest, 78%, is in fact occupied by Israel, de facto, and the majority of the population is outside of the country, i.e. the Palestinian refugees. It will take to the Palestinians, and I'm finishing, I have 7 minutes, right? So, I have 6, sorry. So, in fact, at that moment, what will be done from the national movement, from the Palestinian national movement, will be the transformation. I'm sorry for doing a little bit of history, and maybe I'm repeating things that you say, but I think that what is interesting is to put together the idea of anti-partition as a movement of liberation, and in order to understand that the one state, in fact, there is nothing new about it. It's just a way to read reality, and we will finish about that. Nevertheless, the Palestinian national movement will have this internal debate. Either we are a humanitarian movement or indeed political national movement. The big strategy of Chairman Arafat will be to transform the Palestinian cause into a national cause. National cause won't be, in fact, we want to liberate part of our land. No, we want to liberate all our homeland. And the question of the refugees, the expelled, it's not a humanitarian question, it's a political question. And this is the heart, this is the core of the conflict itself. And from that moment on, will be articulated, in fact, within different fragments and elements of the Palestinian national movement, will be articulate a proposal that can take in account, the minority which is there, which is the Jewish minority, and this will be the famous democratic secular plan of the PLO, as the official plan of the PLO in fact, 1974, 1976. So a one state, secular, of course, with this a caveat that should be said, which is not accepting any kind of immigration that came to Palestine after 1917, after the declaration of Balfour. But nevertheless, what is important is the debate that took place between the Democratic Front, Popular Front, and in fact the left wings of the Palestinian national movement about a subject that I believe that it's maybe the most important subject of the one state, which is the right of the Jews, which means to shift completely not anymore to things in terms of the right of the indigenous people or the right of the Palestinians, and we're used to speak, because this is the natural right of the indigenous, of the autochthons of the country, but in fact to think about something that will be a new kind of right. What are the rights of course, the right of the Jews on this land, which is the actual question indeed. The 70s and this program will fail, and the Palestinians, through pragmatism, will start to think about independence in part of Palestine. And at the same time, Zionist left will start to articulate the idea of the two-state solution of the base of United Nations resolution, which is the acceptance of what was achieved, le fait accompli, the achievement of the fait accompli, which is Israel's policy since it exists, which is to move, and to try to accept the movement as an element which is not anymore negotiable. In fact, a big chance of the two-state solution passed, which was the 1993 Oslo Agreement. But we have to remember there is no Israeli government since 1970, since the left, that didn't consider the expansion of Zionism without consideration of international law, occupied or not occupied territories. The same way that the Galilee was occupied, the same way that the South was occupied, the same idea of settlement, the same movement will be used also by the left government, by Rabin, Shimon Peres and others in the 70s, in order to establish the first settlements. So it's interesting to think about settlements in the West Bank as if the other part of the country is not settlement. I would like to jump to my conclusion now in the minute and a half that I left, in order to say the history of the one state is a permanent history. It's in fact the question of when the conflict starts and what is the relation between indigenous and colonial forces. The one state means the consideration of the conflict as a colonial conflict, and if we are looking at the last 20 years, there is a total emergence of the discourse of the one state, and interestingly enough, of course, the biggest opponent to the one state, it's the mainstream, the Zionist left, and European, Americans, and others, under the fallacious argument that it's not realistic, right? It's not realistic. But more and more we hear that this non-realistic solution, it's very dangerous. We hear Obama saying that it's dangerous, and François Hollande explained that if there will be, we are in the last chance of two states. If there is no two state, will be one state, it's a catastrophe. And this is interesting to think in terms of logic, how something which is a total utopia, as they pretend, which is the one state, can be a danger. If it's a utopia, if it's absolute non-realistic, so there is no danger of it. But I think that there is the deep conscience, especially, and here it's only the documentaries and not the professor of history that is speaking, which is to look at the terrain. And this is the excerpt at the beginning of the film. There is one state, and in fact the Oslo Agreement created a one state. There is only one state on all the territory. There is an authority, which is a kind of a national authority that has some power and not very extended. And the two-state solution, in fact, or the two-state program became the discourse of the suspension of the conflict. If we are walking towards a two-state, the provisoriness, if this word exists in English, of the occupation, it's just temporary. But this temporary, it's 46 years. I mean, it's two times more than the existence of, if we take the existence, the 2/3 of the existence of Israel, and in fact, only 9 months Israel exists without a military occupation in a kind of apartheid. It's from the last month of 1966 until the end of the military government and the occupation of 67. There is one state. And the question that today is, which are facing on the terrain international powers, is what would be the right path to take to try to continue to be attached to a 75 years solution, which is the two-state one, which means to try to split the existing one apartheid state into two states, or in fact, to push into the democratization of this one and unique state under different forms, and we can speak later to one form. This is in fact today the paradigm that is that is on the table, from the simple reason or the complicated reason that the four hard questions of the negotiation cannot be solved within the paradigm of the two-state. And this is why I prefer to speak not in terms of solution, but in terms of two paradigms. Partition separation paradigm facing the one land paradigm. Thank you very much.
This one? Okay. Hi, good evening. Bonsoir. مساء الخير. I heard some Hebrew before, so I have to. So my name is Omar. I do work for an Israeli organization called Zochrot in Hebrew, which means remembering. Actually, this is the female form of the word remembering in Hebrew. The organization was established officially in 2002 in order to raise the awareness to the Palestinian Nakba among the Israeli society in public. Since then, we think that we did a big step doing that in Hebrew. And by the way, this was the only organization, I think it's almost still the only organization that can you find material or information about the Palestinian Nakba in Hebrew. And since we believe that the Nakba is not only part of the history of the Palestinian people, it's also part of the history of the State of Israel and of the Israelis and of Zionism, we believe that Israelis should know, must know, what they had done since the beginning of the Zionist colonialist movement started to colonize Palestine till today. Actually, the lecture of Eyal Sivan, thank you Eyal, and thank you by the way for inviting me to come and talk about this work. The lecture of Eyal was a good basis actually for, and saved a little bit time from both of us. I don't want to explain why we're doing what we are doing, because this was a good thing to know before we start. Actually, the organization was established by Jewish Israeli activists at that time because they realized that the conflict didn't start at 1967, which most of the Israeli Zionist left wing believe or try to resolve the problem standing on the event of 1967, the war of 1967, which means to create a mini state in the West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem, supposed to be, this is the border of 1967, which is not realistic today in any way. And they still believe that the solution should be two states, one Palestinian, one Jewish, and because Israel was occupied and annexed more and more land, so we should admit this fact and recognize that most of the settlements in the West Bank should be part of the State of Israel, and the Palestinian state will be what remained from that. The first thing that Zochrot tried to talk about the Nakba is the destruction of the landscape that the Zionist movement and Israel immediately with the establishment of the state occupied, destroyed, expelled the people, took the property and the villages, destroyed the houses, confiscated the property and the lands, used them for one new ethnic group, the Jewish group, and blocked the return of the Palestinians to come back to their villages and houses. We realize that this is the beginning of that what's so-called conflict, and this is a big question if there is a conflict and when the conflict started. It's not just a conflict between two sides who fight it for one piece of land. It's not a conflict between neighbors. We believe that it's a part of colonialist movement, that people from outside came to that piece of land and took the land and the practice of the way of the occupation that I mentioned a minute before. So based on this understanding, we started to work and to do the work of Zochrot again in Hebrew. This is the uniqueness of Zochrot, that we are doing that in Hebrew. You can find other organizations doing that in Arabic. Sometimes you can find someone doing that in English. But in Hebrew, you will not find any organization almost taking you to a tour to a Palestinian destroyed village. When they say Palestinian, I mean inside the borders of the State of Israel. By the time we understood also that beside the knowledge, we call also the Israelis for acknowledgement and recognition and taking responsibility. And these are actually the steps that the organization did in his 10 years. And I will describe the translation of these ideas or these aspects on the work of the organization. Sometimes people asking us if we did something among the Israelis, and this is a big question because we don't know what we did. But of course we have evidences that more and more Israelis know about the Palestinian Nakba. I don't say that they feel solidarity or they agree with us, but at least they know the event that happened in 1948 called Nakba. Even the word Nakba is used now in Hebrew, like in Arabic or now in English, we talk Hebrew. 10 or 15 years ago, you will not find this term in Hebrew so familiar or so common. So we believe that what we did and other organizations on the field actually pushed this discourse that we call it the Nakba discourse among the Israelis, and more people know about this event. It's not only the Independence Day of the Israelis or the Jewish people in Palestine creating the state. When we go every year, the Israelis have a big celebration in the Rabin Square in Tel Aviv. And every year, activists from Zochrot, actually we send only the Jewish activists to that celebration, and they're going with other flyers or other voices or other photos to show the people celebrating the Independence Day of Israel what happened exactly at that day. So pushing ourselves inside the mainstream of the Israelis is one of the big purposes of Zochrot. For that, we created a booklet for the Israeli Jewish educators with chapters about the Palestinian Nakba, again in Hebrew. We don't have that in Arabic. Most of the things that we do are translated to Arabic and also to English. This booklet is only for the Jewish Israeli educators. And during the years, we did some workshops and conferences dealing with the education of the Nakba, and many Israeli educators, it seems, need that information, and they come to these conferences and they take this material and they use that. Of course, it's not legal even to explain or to talk or to admit the Palestinian Nakba. We are not allowed to get in the schools and explain this event, which we believe that this is the biggest event in the modern history of Palestine and also of the Israelis. So the educators doing that on the side in their history lesson, in their education hour, or in their trip tours around the country in these ways, but not formally and not we say underground. The underground teacher. We created a group for underground teachers in Israel. The website, you can get to the website and you can see many things that you will not find in other places. The most important thing is the interactive map that you can press on the city or the town in Israel today, and you can find what was before that till 1948, and you can find material and information about the village or the Palestinian city before the Israeli city. Zochrot every year commemorate the massacre of Deir Yassin, and I can admit that on the last 10 years, Zochrot was the only organization among the Palestinians and the Israelis who is doing this event for Deir Yassin. Even the Palestinians don't get to the place. By the way, most of them cannot reach the place physically. And the Palestinians inside Israel don't do this commemoration event, but Zochrot does. We try to promote the discussion or the awareness regarding the Palestinian Nakba through arts or films or magazines or books. One amazing project that we did called Sedek in Hebrew, which means crack or bishop, crack. And we published 6 magazines. The last one was actually a book, this book, which called, not only in Arabic but also in Hebrew, Auda, and we will talk about it later. Auda means return, and this is one of the steps that the organization passed through these years, and instead of talking only about the history, we talk also about the future. The tours. One of the, it's hard to say that, but one of the most attractive things that we do is the tour to a Palestinian locality, village or town, visiting the place, exploring what you cannot see usually. Actually, we refuse to accept what the state wants us to see or what the state wants us to know through the signs of the state or the landscape that the state created. Usually it's a beautiful place, beautiful park or forest with signs telling the name of the place, which is new Israeli name in Hebrew, usually, taken from the Bible maybe, or taking the name in Arabic, just Hebrewizing that in a way that it sounds in Hebrew. And they tell the history, the long history of the place, except the Arab history, of course, not the Palestinian history of the place. In this minute, I want to show you a short film of 5 minutes of one of our tours that we did. As I said, the tour will let the people know what is hidden under the view that the state of Israel created and want us to know. For example, this place which is called Beit Knesset Geulat Israel in Nis Tziyona, which actually was the mosque of the village of Beit Hanain, of Wadi Hanain. The same building. This is the mosque as it was till 1948, and now till today it is used as a synagogue. Many cemeteries around the country, Palestinian cemeteries, are destroyed and not preserved. And usually when you visit these places, you will not see that. And even you see, you will not understand what is this. So you need a guide or an organization or a Palestinian refugee to tell you what exactly was there. In some places like Lifta, one of the most famous villages in Palestine, destroyed since 1948. Some of the houses still standing till today over there, and many groups visiting this place. And in these days, the municipality of Jerusalem planning to destroy what remained from the village and to build new Israeli Jewish neighborhoods. Voice. הציבור שלנו שורק בתוך הכפר, תוך בגד, ושורק מתחת הכפר למעיין. Sorry, I just want to fix the sound here. Is this the sound? Yeah. איתנו אבו ג'מאל, איש שהתקלנו אותו לפני כמה חודשים בטיול מקדים שעשינו אנחנו ועומר עם עוד קבוצה של אנשים שבעצם יצאו בקשר עם המשפחה הזאת. محمد محمود عمري 75 تقريبا. الحين ساكن انا في قريه اسمها واد حفيظ قريبه منا يعني. نعم. הדרך הזאת שאנחנו נכנסים אליה היא בעצם הייתה הדרך הראשית לכניסה לכפר. הכפר פה קצת רבות לעבר קדימה. ولي البلد، هذا الولي كان في البلد يعني هذا المختار معناته تكون وجه للبلد يعني الحكومه اللي بيجي على البلد اول هو بيستجيب له. في معنا شويه مصطلحات. هذه مقبرتنا احنا آل ابدا، هذه مش كل البلد. البلد فيها ثلاث مذابح. كل يعني تقريبا يعني مكتوبه كل يعني كم يكون فيها مقبره. فهذا يعني بده يكون هذا قياسي اللي فيها هذا عمي فيها عمتي فيها خالي فيها خالي. هذا القبر كان له ابويا يعني. هذا القبر محمود مصطفى عبد الله، وهذا كان ابوه موجود في هذا القبر مصطفى عبد الله. فهذا احنا لما اجينا بنجي الاطعام مرميه على الارض طالعه من القبور. צריכים להגיד שאנחנו ישבנו בכפר שלנו, אבל ב-48, כאשר כוחות ההגנה התחילו לתקוף כפרים מסביב, כולל הכפר שלנו וגם כפרים אחרים, ונעשו ראיות והתפרעות לתושבים. أول ما انحجروا الناس كلها المنطقة هذه طلعت على بيتنا. منطقة القدس طلعت على القدس. احنا منطقتنا هذه طلعت على بيتنا. على بيتنا. כל ערימות האבנים שאתם רואים בעצם זה בתים שעמדו כאן לשני הצדדים של הדרך, וליד כל בית הייתה גינה קטנה, שבתוך הגינה נטעו עצים מעורבני תאנים, עצים ואחרים.
מדובר בסוף 48, כנראה באוקטובר, נובמבר 48 הייתה התקפה הראשונה.